2023 was a roller coaster of a year. I honestly wouldn't have expected half of what happens this year to happen as it did. I love to sit down at the end of each year in my life, as my birthday kind of aligns with the end of the year, which is pretty convenient. For a quick summary of my journey so far this year, I started in debt living in Thailand. Then I got a job here in Sydney, Australia, got fired from that job, and sort of fell into making money online. Throughout all this time, I've been traveling mainly Australia with a few countries outside of Australia here and there, and had the opportunity to meet and connect with some really, really amazing people. Sharing these lessons on the internet is not only a way for me to process the past year and cement these lessons into my own mind, but hopefully at least one person out there can take some sort of value out of watching this as they go into 2024 with these insights and avoid some of the same pitfalls that I did. You know, they say that experience increases knowledge, but true wisdom is learning from others' mistakes. So I hope you gain wisdom through watching this video. So without further ado, here are 12 things that I learned in 2023. They mostly have to do with how one should interact with the world and how to process the external world as well as what it provides. So first thing that I learned was to embrace the tough times, as that's where the most growth occurs. Wrapping up 2022, I just had completed 4 months of really intense travel. I was living my best life, but also my most expensive. I had started the year with the most credit card debt I'd ever accrued, and I was living in Thailand to try to minimize expenses. My friend Will, who you guys have met through some other videos I've been traveling with, and we had recently parted ways, and I was now on my own in a completely foreign country. But I had debt and a lack of responsibility, which kind of gave me the drive to work all that I could. I would start my day figuring out how to start or reignite a social media content agency and make some quick money to live off of that way. Later in the day, I would get into applying for jobs in Australia, where I had planned to move for next year. Even after, I had some time to explore the areas of Thailand that I was in, which was super cool and just an overall great experience. From this kind of grind mode that I was in, I ended up doing a 3-day fast and training Muay Thai. You can see both those videos here if you like. And this time in my life, I was actually the most worried financially that I'd ever been, but I still kept this optimistic outlook on life and portrayed myself as a very optimistic person. The beginning of the year with this very heavy financial pressure was honestly the time that I grew the most out of the whole year. And it was the beginning of the year, so it really shows New Year's resolutions do help, at least for that short little run of time. If you are watching this, when things look down, I'll really apply that pressure and use it as fuel to get more stuff done. We often aren't motivated by the dream of the best case scenario, but instead by the fear of the worst case scenario, which was what I was trying to avoid here. The second thing that I learned this past year was to lead others with the proper incentives. So with this whole social media agency that I was building, I had one client and I decided to hire a subcontractor to help me with a lot of the work. The subcontractor was a really good friend of mine, and he had the skills, to be quite honest. But I had to train him in a lot of other things to really get him to the level that the client was expecting. He thought that really he could get everything done with the minimal effort put in, which I kind of saw through that. And the client wasn't the best either in this case. Deadlines were late often, and there was a lot of problems with the files transfers. I ended up giving him software that he should be buying on his own and giving him the content ideas and really having to double check every single piece of work that he did, which he should just be providing the high quality work up front. And further down the line, the client ended up leaving, which I don't blame them honestly, but I learned a lot of valuable things about leading others in a company. I needed to have proper deadlines in place, good incentives for the subcontractors' employees to get work done. And the first employee that I ever had really taught me like so much. And even today with the different subcontractors that I hire, I'm learning daily with how to interact with them, how to really increase their creativity and giving them the freedom to work on their own schedules as well as get things done in the proper allotted time. The main thing though was to have the proper incentive in place for them to get their work done at a quality level. Now, when I collaborate with others and even with my own work with clients, I see how having the proper incentives really do push people to provide their best work. The third thing that I learned, which really was hard hitting for me, was persistence is not everything. So going back to my day job that I was working in Sydney, I was really trying to focus on doing my best there. I just moved into a flat here and I'm actually moving out today, which is kind of crazy. So really fitting. But I was starting to get a little bit of consistency in my life for the first time in like 6 months. And my job was in sales, so it wasn't the easiest thing for me either. Since I was quite new at sales, I had a lot of room to improve, and I would get up every morning, take the bus to work, and just read my sales script while listening to audiobooks on sales to really try to get my skills better. I was definitely putting in the reps, and I was dialing numbers like crazy. I think for weeks at a time, I was like the most dials, like just the hardest at work. I would skip my lunch breaks and just really put my nose to the grindstone. I'd usually be one of the first people in the office as well as the last to leave, but that was really the problem. I tried to reflect after every call on what I did well and how I could improve, but I guess whatever I was doing wasn't really coming into practice. And mostly I just winged the calls, honestly, which wasn't the best look. And I thought it would just come naturally to me over time. Then it happened. Something that changed the entire trajectory of my year and possibly looking forward my entire life. Since I wasn't really performing well in the sales role, a couple months into the role, I was fired. My bosses told me that it was honestly a hard call for them because I was definitely putting in the effort. And they said I just wasn't naturally gifted at what they were looking for. There I learned I can't just put in the work and expect the results to come. There's work that has to be intentional and highly calculated. And what I personally needed to work on was the quality of my execution rather than just the reps and praying to get a sale. I've always been someone who thought if I just put in the work and worked hard enough, I would get what I want. And up until this point in my life, it had always worked for me. And for the first time in my life, I truly failed at something. And it wasn't just because I didn't try. I'd put in the work and I'd actually tried too hard in this case. Now, when I work, I try to work with a more analytical approach and not just try to force things as much. The next lesson I learned was to live in abundance. So I was very lucky after getting fired that I could rely on my design skills. And within a week, I had actually gotten offered a new job and was even holding myself over with that week period between different freelance projects. So the week after I got fired, as I had gotten some freelance projects in, I actually decided to reward myself with a trip to Melbourne. And then I decided that I would just try to enjoy my time being freelance and really embrace the freedom that it gave me. Just around this time, I saw a lot of people I knew that were in Bali, and it was only a 6-hour flight away. I was debating going for like 2 weeks. People had invited me and everything. But then I finally decided to make the leap after friends told me that I should just try to live life in abundance. This was another pivotal decision, and I didn't feel like I had enough money to justify this trip, but I was going to network a ton and meet some incredible people that I would stay in contact with many months later. Bali showed me that I could truly live this carefree lifestyle, if you'd like to say, and feel like a millionaire while doing it. From there, I decided that whenever I had the choice to invest in myself for experiences or learning or anything like that versus just saving money, I would almost always choose the investment, as I knew that the value that I would get from it would possibly help me make that money back tenfold. After that, I learned that a sustainable lifestyle is actually worth living. So when I returned from Bali, I had now like a new fire under my ass. I was doing the whole freelancing thing, so I had gotten into a routine properly for the first time in a while that month. I had a small social circle that I really enjoyed, and I had plans to socialize during the weekends, really get work done during the week, and just make as much money as I could. I was doing the work that was truly fulfilling to me, which was an amazing feeling. And I was enjoying this simple lifestyle of like hanging out with my few friends on the weekends and just kind of doing the work that I loved. I remember I was having a late night conversation with some friends, and these words kind of just flowed out of my mouth. I could live this exact week for the next year, and I'd absolutely love my life. The week that I had just worked, I had a bigger client project, and I was socializing regularly, and I didn't really do any of the big partying that I was used to the year prior. I socialized more meaningfully with people that I genuinely wanted to build connections with, and I felt financially stable and was actively growing my income. So life was going well in like all areas. I was exercising regularly, I had money, I had friends. The past year, I was traveling a ton, and I was not really staying in one place for more than a month. And for the first time in a year, I truly felt at home and wanted to continue my lifestyle exactly as it was. Much of my life before then was super fast paced, and I was always looking for the next phase or the next place to go or to change my situation somehow. But for once, I was really at peace. And I really enjoyed the place that I was at. And now I know that I can never recreate those few months where things were consistent here in Sydney. But I do know there's beauty and real happiness when things are in a routine and you find meaning in just day-to-day life. But as that famous quote goes, this too shall pass. A little bit later on, a lesson that really came into my life was you're already living the dream life. As a high achiever, I'm always looking on the horizon for the next level and comparing myself to others. I was networking with a lot of new people, and they were amazed by how much I'd traveled and how much I had already accomplished in my personal business. Even to me, how it was just very minimal progress. This year, I learned that I had accomplished all that I set out to do 2 years ago when I really set my goals in January 2022. And I honestly could not be more proud of myself. It's a really amazing feeling. A lot of the time, we're so focused on the future and what's out there that we forget how far we've come. And it's important, I realize, to look back on your previous goals, what you set out to do, and see how much you've progressed. It's okay to give yourself a pat on the back and congratulate yourself every once in a while for all the work that you put in. I'm gonna take this chance to congratulate you. Yes, you watching this video, because right now you are, in one way or another, the person that your younger self dreamed of becoming. Look back on all your accomplishments, no matter how small, and think about how much hard work that you put in. It was worth it. And now, with that being said, with looking back on everything, you can strive towards the next level. Another thing that I learned from this prior year was the best things in life are unplanned. So during this next one, I'm gonna get pretty vulnerable. And shout out to anyone who has made it this far in the video. Definitely feel free on subscribing if you like this kind of content. I really appreciate you getting this far, watching this many minutes. You know, your time and attention is really, really something special. Anyway, with that, I'm gonna open up my heart to you guys. As I said earlier, I set up myself pretty well in Sydney. And one of the ways I set myself up well was in my romantic life. I had someone that I was seeing pretty consistently, and there was a little connection that had come about super naturally. I'd gotten to the point where I was confident in myself and I really didn't care about my love life. I wasn't on any dating apps or anything. I wasn't really like cold approaching people. I was just kind of like chilling with myself. And someone great just happened to appear in my life, and I explored that option for a little bit. When going deeper into it, I found that it honestly wasn't the best option for me long term. It was good for that short term period. And I was just having fun in the moment. Then out of nowhere, another curveball came in, and I met another really fantastic person. Both of these curveballs, they just happened when I least expected it, you know? At one point, I was fine being by myself. Someone came into my life and I was like, all right, cool. This is cool for the short term while I'm in Aussie. And then even after that, I was like, all right, like I'm happy with what's happening in my romantic life now. And then just bang, another person came in and I was like, dang, wow. So the universe works in very, very funny ways, and it presents opportunities when you truly are ready for them, but not necessarily when you want them. Despite both these not developing into anything that was super duper deep, I'm happy that I met some cool people at the end of the day and that they appeared at the right times for me. So similar to the lesson in persistence isn't everything, you can't just force the right people to enter your life. The universe works in extremely mysterious ways, and you just have to trust that it'll give you what you need when you're ready for it. And there are always surprises just waiting around the corner. This has me very excited for next year, as I already have plans that are pretty big, and somehow life is going to find a way to just one up my plans. The next thing I learned is that your mind is infinitely programmable. I made it very, very public on my social media platforms that I was taking a 2-week social media detox. Honestly, I recognize now that I was being super annoying about it. I'm so sorry for everyone who had to deal with that, but in truth, it was because I was super excited for this experiment. You can watch my full video on the takeaways about it right here. Stay hydrated. What I found in that lack of stimulation was the smallest bits of information would have a profound impact on me. I would hear something on the radio while I was working, just from one of the other guys, and that would kind of surround my thoughts for the next week. Now think about your current media consumption. Whether you realize it or not, the internet is programming you and your mind, always. It is telling you what to think, and even the smallest pieces of content, your mind is going to process in the next few hours subconsciously. So that's why it's super important to be aware of all the information that you're consuming and not just let the algorithm program you as it will just to get you to stay on the platform longer. Next time you're just scrolling through, Stop and think, are you actually enjoying and getting value out of the content you're seeing? Or are you just used to it because the algorithm has been showing it to you? Be intentional with what you consume, as your brain can be programmed in so many different ways. Whether you're conscious of it or not. Another lesson that was hard to put into words was the inexplicable nature of life and death. During my time on the dairy farm, I had a lot of time to myself to ruminate and think. I thought about my life, the universe, and definitely the cows that I was in charge of. My main responsibility on the farm was to take care of all the newborn calves. And while I helped bring life into the world at times, I also sadly saw life leaving this world. Through all my time there, I had new thoughts on mortality and life in general that I can't necessarily put into words. The farm arc of my whole development is an unforgettable experience, and I wouldn't replace it for anything. It's crazy the amount of weird stuff that I did that I definitely can't talk about here on YouTube. And if you asked Talon a couple years ago, who grew up in New York City, if he'd ever be working on a farm, the answer would be hell no. Being so close to the circle of life, I realized that humans are truly a part of it. And no matter how much we try to separate ourselves with houses, computers, moving into a city, like just putting on boots, we're not separate from it. We are life and life is us. But anyway, the main thing I'd love you to walk away with here is that you can die at any time. In fact, it's even a miracle that you've lived this long in the first place to get to this point in your life, and take advantage of this miracle. Live every day like it could be your last. As much as I like to think that I'm infinite and that I'm responsible for everything in my life, I had a harsh reminder that we have limited control over the things that happen to us in our lives. And sometimes it doesn't serve us to ruminate over things outside of our control. Through my past travels, I had the wonderful opportunity of traveling to parts of Palestine and even actually living in Israel for an extended period of time. The news of what was happening in the Middle East had a profound impact on me. I remember it was when I was working on the farm, and I knew these types of things had a direct cause and effect relationship. So I was diving deep into the research to extract the exact events that had led to this point. I had a lot of friends that live in the region, and some were actually serving in the military. And incredibly enough, someone even that I had met was being held hostage, and I saw their face on these hostage posters. And I was like, wow, I actually met this guy and had a conversation with him. So that just really brought it close to home. There was one moment where I got home after work and I had this conflict circling in my head all day, and I felt like truly powerless. I was literally just sitting outside my house in my car, listening to music for I don't know how long. It probably was somewhere close to 2 hours, because my housemate came out and he said, "You've been sitting out here for like a good couple of hours." I just couldn't bring myself to do anything other than just to sit and think and listen to music. Finally, after a really hard week of that, it dawned on me, I can either entrench myself in it using my limited reach on social platforms to hopefully reach the right people, or I could either take a backseat, turn off all the news to it, as indeed I was thousands of miles away. As important as this whole issue is, I realized that there are only a few key people who are calling the shots in this, and the best thing I can do in this particular moment is count my own blessings and send my support to those that I know personally, and try to spread as much positivity as I can directly to those in my proximity. And hopefully with that positivity, it'll spread out and have a ripple effect. Social media is a really powerful tool, but are these key players really seeing what you are posting? Even so, there are others who are taking every bit of energy that they have and using it to report on these events. So I'll leave it to those experts. I'll leave it to those people who are like me, have limited resources, but do decide that this is something that they do want to delve into, because that's perfect for them. I have so much going on in my life that I'd rather direct more energy to some other things that I can have a greater impact on, and then come back to this later. This in turn would help relieve my mental stress and just make me an overall better person to those within my direct proximity. I have some friends who actually criticize me for this way of approaching things, but I found that I'm mentally healthier because of it. And I think that I'm more service when I can think clearly and be a wholly positive influence to those around me, rather than if I'm emotionally and mentally strained. So continue to put yourself in the best state you possibly can, even if it does require sacrificing in other areas of life, as you'll be of more service to others when you are in this heightened state. One of the last things I learned this year is you can never recreate a moment. When returning to Sydney from the farm, I'd expected to pick up my life where I left it, and I had friends I wanted to see. I was super excited to get back in my old routine, but when I did get back, a lot of that had changed, honestly. Some of my friends were very different people from when I left, and others had different priorities and were preoccupied with those. Even some of my personal relationships completely fell off. So I loved my life in Sydney before I left and wanted to have it back again so badly. And the moment had already passed. So I just had to look towards the future and be present in what was happening to me then. Around the same time, I had a friend come visit me, and we decided to take this big grand road trip up the East Coast. And you can check out that video as well on my channel. The trip was absolutely incredible, unforgettable, but I just tried to remain in the present moment and remember all the parts that I could about that trip, as I knew it was fleeting, and that's what honestly made it special. The nature of how each phase of your life or event is a finite moment. So you can treasure it and just be present enough to really appreciate it wholly. And when it does come to pass, remember the better things that are on the horizon, because you can't live in the past. Lastly, this past year I learned to be intentional about those that you surround yourself with. As my time here in Australia is coming to an end, I'm starting to plan out the next year of my life and thinking about the places that I want to live and who I want to share my time with. And I know I'll be back in New York for a significant part of 2024, and I will have the pleasure of reconnecting with some old friends. Going back to one of the previous lessons, when you are away, others' lives aren't on pause and they just keep going, just as your life is going on while you're away. And I've changed a ton over this past year, and I assume that those back home have changed as well. I know that what I value in a friend has changed, and becoming more intentional about how those around me are either helping me pursue my goals or hindering my progress is really important to me. On top of that, I always have been someone who had a large quantity of friends rather than a few very quality friends. And part of the next phase of my life is developing a really tight circle around me. We're all focused on similar things and can really provide great support to one another. Instead of casting a very wide net and getting a ton of friends, people I know everywhere, I'm going to focus on the few quality friends who are kind of the ride or dies and all have a similar purpose. On top of that, I found that I tend to be very forceful and clingy in my personal relationships, and I honestly have had in the past an insecure attachment style, and that's something I'm really trying to work on right now. So in part of that thinking of trying to develop a more secure attachment style, I'm going to trust that the right people are going to enter my life at the right times and not try to really force anything. You know, this kind of connects all the previous lessons together, as I was trying to force stuff at the job and it didn't work out. Well, if I let things come naturally, especially people in my life, they just happen to come when the time is right. I'll just continue to better myself and trust that when I am ready to socialize more, the right people will just be attracted to my person at that time. And you can definitely be more intentional about your relationships as well, as you are the sum of the 5 people you spend the most time around. If you have friends that are kind of lagging behind you in their growth or have habits that you see aren't really the best, you should consider kind of separating yourself from them for a little bit and seeing if someone comes along to kind of fill in that gap. So in closing, thank you guys for listening so much on me rambling on about different life lessons that I'm only learning at 22 years old. I'm very shortly turning the page on a new chapter in my life. I'm turning a year older pretty soon, and I'm super excited for what's to come. If you agree with any of these lessons that I learned, or if you learned something yourself and you're going to apply it in your own life, feel free to leave a comment below. Also, if there are any lessons that you personally learned and you think are worth sharing, I'd love to hear from you, either in the comments or the most direct way to contact me if you want to have a one-on-one conversation is through my Instagram at talon.in.color. Like this video if you got any sort of value out of it, so others can come and see and learn something, as the algorithm does push it to more people, so more people can get value out of this. My mission is just for one person with each video that I put out to gain something out of it, which I hope that was you. So subscribe for more videos. We have a ton of cool adventures coming up, and you don't want to miss any of them. Otherwise, continue exploring and hope you have an epic day.